One member asked me to tell them more about the worm tower. Not a problem. I can talk about composting all day long. The Permaculture Research Institute, permaculturenews.org. I like this image that they have on their website because it gives a pretty good visual of what's going on in the ground. They have this as a pipe tower and then a flower pot lid. So slightly different construction, but same idea. So the part that I have buried, which I have covered with hardware cloth, that's where these items would be that you're seeing here. So worm castings and juice, they leak out. As things leach out into the soil, those nutrients are going to be uptaken by the roots of whatever you plant around it. So here in the demonstration, they have several lettuces, they have some carrots, and they have cabbage. And all of these things are just picking up the nutrients out of the soil. So the top of toward the top of your worm tower, you're going to see here in their demonstration, the pipe tower, vegetable scraps and other things such as paper, other organic materials. And when I say organic, I'm not necessarily meaning a certified organic materials. I just mean natural materials like paper, anything that doesn't have like colored glossy ink on it. So I use a lot of junk mail, as long as it's just printer paper and a little bit of ink, nothing glossy, just like black and white ink. I just rip it up and toss it in. Newsprint is really good. Newsprint, if you didn't know, is printed with soy ink. So it's completely natural. Depending on how you feel about soy, you may or may not be comfortable with that, but it is a natural product. The paper itself is natural and the soy ink is natural. So that's a good thing to put in there. So, and then they included a flower pot lid on theirs. Again, it's a good idea to just put something over the top so that you're keeping rodents out, deterring rodents from getting in. They don't give a lot of visual demonstration here for how they put the flower pot lid together. If it was me, I would put a bunch of holes with a drill in the top so that rainwater could get in, and so that just the natural gases that are created and the natural condensation that is created as the ingredients are breaking down can be released out of the top. But I would keep those holes small enough that a rodent couldn't get in. And if you were to just put a flower pot on top, I want to make sure that it's a good size to cover and hold it down with something heavy like a rock so that rodents can't get in. So that's a little bit more detail, a slightly different way of going about doing the same thing as what I did in my worm tower. And my worm tower construction was slightly different. I don't like to use plastic. I didn't want to buy anything if I didn't need to. The first one that I built was really just a proof of concept to see if it was going to work, and if so, how well, and how much work was it going to be for me. So I just used reclaimed fence posts, or fence pickets rather. We have a bunch of fence pickets that needed to be replaced on our fence. So when we took them down, mostly they were just rotten at the bottom, so they weren't serving much good for us anymore on the fence because we have a dog and I don't want the dog to get out. So what I did was just cut off the rotten part at the bottom, and then I still had a good 4 or 5 feet to work with that was still in good condition. The fence pickets are made of cedar, and so I could use those and not worry about any undesirable things being leached, any undesirable chemicals being leached into the compost. It's untreated cedar, so it's also, you know, pretty good at deterring bugs too. Depends on the type of bug. I know some people are concerned about putting in a worm tower if they live in a place where there are fire ants. They're concerned that the fire ants might take over their garden, and that wouldn't be good, and I totally understand that. And I don't think cedar there's kind of mixed reviews about cedar being good at deterring fire ants. So if that's a concern for you where you live, then a worm tower like this might not be a good setup for you in your vegetable garden. You might still be able to use it just as a way of composting. It's essentially just the same thing as any other way of composting with worms. So vermicomposting, you can find lots of vermicomposting towers and setups. I used to have one, I referred to it as the worm condo. And it was not cheap and it was very effective. But this method with building it out of just reclaimed wood, even if I were to buy the fence pickets brand new, it would still be a lot cheaper than buying the worm towers. And there's nothing wrong with starting out with a commercial worm tower. That's what I started with. They're very easy to work with. It sort of takes all the guesswork out of the whole thing, which is nice. But it is not the most cost-effective way to do it either. So, you know, there's good and bad in everything, and whichever method works best for you, there's absolutely no judgments for me on that. So I just wanted to show one last sort of screenshot of how I set my worm tower up. So you can see here at the bottom, the sides are closed with wood. The front and the back are open and wrapped with hardware cloth. So I attached the hardware cloth with staples, with heavy duty staples. And then I attached these pieces toward the middle bottom. They were just some broken pieces of fence posts that broke apart when we took the pickets off. I just attached them like feet. I was worried that maybe it would blow over in the rain or fall over in the wind, or I don't know. I just wanted to make sure that I was getting it buried to the right depth and just add a little bit of stability. And it also did a good job of like sandwiching the hardware cloth between the worm tower and the feet. So it's nice and secure. It's going to make it harder for a rodent to pry that back and get in there and get to the compost. So after attaching the feet, I just took it out to the garden. I buried it. So this portion that has the hardware cloth on the bottom, you don't see that in any of my videos because it's buried. But that's what I'm referring to when I say that it's open and the worms can get in and out if they need to. So having it open on the bottom has the added benefit of also giving the worms the ability to get out of the compost stack, the worm tower, if they need to. So if it gets really cold or really hot, they can retreat down into the soil and wait out the weather, and they will return. They'll go back to the resources when the weather is more desirable. So you don't really have to worry about your worms escaping. You don't even need to buy worms. If you build it, they will come. The red wiggler worms are really popular composting worms because they're very efficient. Regular earthworms or night crawlers or whatever you have in your soil, if you provide the medium, they will show up and they will do their work. They do great work too. So I hope that that answered some questions. And if you have more questions, feel free to let me know.